Up till now, our rewatch has mostly followed solo superheroes, with Daredevil and Elektra being the exception. We had Blade going through vampire nightclubs, Spider-Man carrying the weight of New York on his shoulders, and even Daredevil was suffering in silence. Their burdens were still singular. But tonight, that all changes with X-Men First Class. Welcome back to Marvel In Memoriam.
With great power comes great responsibility.
What more could I lose?
I am the X-Men.
Avengers!
I love you 3000.
The film begins in Auschwitz, 1944. A young Erich Lencher is torn from his parents and under the weight of terror and grief bends metal with his mind. A Nazi scientist named Sebastian Shaw sees potential in him. Shaw kills Erich's mother to force his powers to surface. That trauma becomes Erich's foundation. Across the ocean in suburban New York, a young Charles Xavier discovers that he's not alone. He meets Raven, a shapeshifter hiding in plain sight, trying to steal from his family home. Charles welcomes her, gives her a place to stay, and takes her in. He embraces mutation as something extraordinary. Even as a child, he believes being different is something to celebrate. Years later, in 1962, the world is on the brink of nuclear annihilation during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Erich has grown into a man hunting Nazis across Europe. His search leads him back to Shaw, who is now orchestrating global tensions in order to trigger nuclear war. Shaw believes that humanity will destroy itself, clearing the way for mutants to inherit the Earth. Charles, now an Oxford geneticist, believes mutants represent the next stage of human evolution, but he believes in coexistence. When CIA agent Moira McTaggart uncovers Shaw's involvement in geopolitical manipulation, Charles is brought into the conflict. This is where Charles and Erich meet. Their connection is immediate. They are intellectual equals, but emotional opposites. Together, they recruit young mutants and begin training them at a CIA facility. Hank McCoy hides his physical mutation behind intellect. Alex Summers struggles to control destructive energy. Sean Cassidy tries to prove himself. Raven wrestles with whether she should continue hiding her true form. For a brief moment, it feels hopeful. They are building something new. But Shaw escalates the Cuban Missile Crisis. His plan forces the United States and the Soviet Union into direct confrontation. The final battle unfolds at sea. Erich kills Shaw in front of Charles, forcing a coin through his skull slowly, mirroring the method Shaw once used to torture him. It is a calculated act of vengeance. When human forces turn their missiles towards the mutants, Erich stops them and nearly retaliates. Charles tries to reason with him. Moira fires at Erich, but Erich deflects the bullet. The stray bullet hits Charles in the lower spine, leaving him paralyzed. Erich leaves with those who believe humanity cannot be trusted, including Raven. The dream survives, but their friendship does not. When this film entered production, the X-Men franchise was unstable. Audiences were uncertain about its direction, and trust had eroded after the uneven reception of previous installments. Producer Bryan Singer, who had made the original X-Men trilogy, developed the prequel concept, but directing duties went to Matthew Vaughn. Vaughn approached the material with a very specific goal: reduce the noise, increase the character focus. The production schedule was compressed. The film was fast-tracked with limited time for development, meaning rewrites continued during filming. Under those constraints, Vaughn leaned into tone rather than scale. Instead of escalating spectacle, he embraced the Cold War setting. The film feels closer to a political thriller than a traditional superhero sequel. The retro 1960s aesthetic, the sharp tailoring, the espionage flavor, all of it creates a sense of elegance and restraint. The casting proved crucial. James McAvoy portrays Charles as charismatic and brilliant, but also arrogant and untested. He is confident that reason can solve fear because he has not yet experienced irreversible loss. Michael Fassbender brings gravity to Erich. His performance is controlled, intense, and quietly devastating. The ideological split between these two men feels earned because their friendship feels truly genuine. Now, you may have noticed that we're not watching in release order. This film felt like the most appropriate first team-up film for our phase because it felt tonally similar to what had come before it. It's genuine, it's tonally focused, it doesn't abandon spectacle, but that's not its end goal, and it works. The tonal reset extended to the music. Vaughn brought in Henry Jackman, whom he had previously worked with. The choice was rooted in trust. With a tight production timeline, Vaughn needed a composer who could work quickly and shape a distinct identity without relying on legacy motifs. Jackman had trained within the Hans Zimmer production environment, giving him experience blending modern textures with orchestral weight. Magneto's theme stands out. It's not triumphant, it's restrained, it's tragic. and then it hits. The score blends espionage rhythms with emotional orchestration, reinforcing that this is a story about ideological fracture, not bombastic victory. The music underscores the tragedy of friendship more than the spectacle of power. But on top of all of that, it truly is a team movie with a team score. At its heart, this film asks a question we haven't encountered yet in this rewatch. What happens when two people with the same goal disagree on how to achieve it? Charles believes mutants must prove they belong. Eric believes mutants must ensure they cannot be oppressed. Raven represents identity crisis. Hank represents the desire to correct oneself. The younger mutants are not yet symbols. They're uncertain young people trying to define themselves in a world that fears them. That uncertainty is what gives this film its power. And as always, if we're going to be looking at Marvel, we must assume Doom. Now, when we imagine what Doctor Doom could have in store for the X-Men, we're obviously thinking of their current form, their older form. But in order to understand them, I think we need to look specifically at their 1962 versions. This Charles is still experimenting with the limits of telepathy. He's building early versions of Cerebro. He's amplifying minds across vast distances. He believes visibility and persuasion can change human nature. And this Eric has already justified lethal retaliation. He has already demonstrated that he is willing to redirect nuclear weapons if pushed far enough. They're not yet entrenched, they're still volatile, and volatility is what Doom studies. While Doctor Doom might have reason to fear the elderly professor who's already lived through multiple ideological wars, he would more likely analyze the younger telepath who is still curious enough to push boundaries. He'd also examine the younger Magneto, whose anger has not yet cooled into doctrine. A telepath capable of influencing world leaders during a nuclear crisis, a magnetokinetic mutant capable of hijacking global arsenals, a movement that is not yet solidified. So if Doom were to engineer an incursion to his advantage, and if he were to bring versions of these characters to his side, these would be the versions to do it. If ideological tension were to be manipulated, this era is the weak point. This is the ignition stage, and Doom understands ignition. If he hopes to manipulate their older, wiser selves, he may start here. Even though the team divides at the end of the film, this is still the origin of the X-Men. We see Charles Xavier become Professor X, we see Eric Lencher become Magneto, we meet Mystique, we meet Beast. These characters are going to endure throughout the saga. Now, obviously when this movie came out, we already knew these characters intimately, but for the sake of this rewatch, this is a great introduction. Now, another thing that this movie does well that I think is equal to introducing these characters is it shows that a universe can fraction not just from megalomaniacal villains or cataclysmic events, but because two friends simply don't agree on the future. They don't believe in that same future. And I think the effects of that are cosmic. It could affect their universe, and it did, and ultimately it's going to affect the multiverse at large. So, in the words of Magneto, mutant and proud. If you like what you saw here today, like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.